Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. Elon Musk is taking on Texas voting machines. We're going to talk just a little bit about that. Also, the Texas conservative commitment, which I did overview on a video that I posted on YouTube and Twitter, or X, if you call it that. And then we're going to also discuss the opposite approach that some as opposed to the existing House leadership have taken when it comes to how to message their cooperation with the Texas GOP. So we're going to talk about the Texas conservative commitment and how it kind of runs in opposition to the grassroots in the Texas GOP, and then some other examples of the opposite approach that's been taken by a number of members. Let's get to the show. Elon Musk. He is the wealthiest American, the wealthiest Texan, somebody who has, in his words, not moved at all in the last several years. He says the left left him, right? But the reality is that Elon Musk probably has moved to the right on a number of issues, or at least has been willing to oppose some of the more radical leftist ideas that they have presented, and is somebody who has championed this kind of Texas versus California conversation that's happening. Which way should America go? And are Texas and California giving America kind of visions of two different states and in directions of how you would approach your citizens, your populace, and all these things. He's also somebody that knows just a little bit about technology. I hope we can all admit that he does. I mean, he's somebody who we all would agree is somebody who's on the forefront of AI, of SpaceX and space exploration, of electric vehicles and cars. So this guy knows a lot about technology. And he tweeted out on June 15th, a tweet that has gotten almost 100 million views. 99,700,000 people have viewed this tweet. And it says, we should eliminate electronic voting machines. The risk of being hacked by humans or AI, while small, is still too high. Now, there are some people who really don't want to have a conversation about electronic voting machines, and they want to act and let's say they want to relegate people who are concerned about electronic voting machines to a couple wacko right wingers who live in their parents' basement or something. I don't know. They basically try to act like there's a couple Neanderthals out there who don't believe that having the electronic voting machine system we have is the most secure way to conduct elections. He also couches it with a statement that says, look, the chance of them getting hacked while small is still too high. So what is he saying? He's saying, he's not saying that he believes that everybody who has electronic voting machines means the election has been stolen, which there are those who, it's like every time a county will go the right direction, I'll talk to an activist who says, well, those city council elections, I think maybe the machines messed up. I think there might have been voter fraud. But then when that same county conducted the GOP primary elections and they won, they don't think that election was rigged. So I do understand the concern that some people just go immediately to the machines if the election doesn't go their way. But I think that Elon Musk is bringing up a legitimate concern, and I think he speaks from a position of knowledge that can basically be a voice that people actually take seriously. So with that being said, it's worth noting that in the Republican legislative priorities that pass, I'm going to go through them very quickly. It's border enforcement, securing Texas elections, stop sexualizing Texas kids, no Democrat chairs, ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, secure the electric grid, Texas is not for sale, we shouldn't let China buy our land, end federal overreach. Those are the legislative priorities. And then Chairman Abraham George also put out a statement just to make it clear that school choice and property tax relief, while they were close in the votes they received at the convention, they didn't get to the top legislative priorities, but they will still be policies that the Republican Party of Texas fights very hard to pass. And I think we all can count on our SREC and our chair and vice chair and new leadership to push those issues very strongly. Now we have securing the Texas elections, and it is a robust set of requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote, requiring county secretary of state to update the voter rolls quarterly, requiring mandatory photo ID for every single election. Mail-in ballots were limited to less individuals having the ability to do it, using hand-marked sequentially numbered paper ballots or anti-counterfeiting paper that are signed on the back by election officials at the voting location. This would be moving our state away from the machines that Elon Musk says are so concerning. There's several other things. You can go to texasgop.org/priorities to read. But when you go through that Texas election, secure Texas elections plank, you will see this is a rather robust list of reforms that the grassroots have said they want to enact. Now, that actually transitions us well to the Texas conservative commitment. And last week, the Dade Phelan kind of top lieutenants, Greg Bonin, Brad Buckley, Cody Harris, Dustin Burrows, these guys who are, a core part of the lieutenants under Dade, worked really, really hard to whip a bunch of people into shape, and were able to muster together 43 signatures on the Texas conservative commitment. I find this interesting because in the course of getting a lot of people to sign this, they were telling members, we're not going to release it till we have 50 signatures. I think that's fun. And then they just couldn't get there. They just couldn't get there. And honestly, they were losing people. People were pulling their name off of this thing. And then they just said, okay, fine, we're going to release it before we get to less than half of the caucus that will sign this. Now, if you go to TexasConservativeCommitment.com, you can see all these Dade Phelan guys putting their name to this. Now, there are some other members that put their name to this that I wouldn't consider Dade Phelan lieutenants. In fact, there are quite a few that actually signed the commitment that said they will not vote. In fact, there are 17 individuals who signed the letter that said, we will not vote for Dade Phelan, essentially. They basically said, we will vote for no speaker that is going to appoint Democrat chairs. So 17 of the people that did that, 17 of the 46, also signed the Texas conservative commitment. So I wouldn't call those individuals Dade Phelan lieutenants, but I would say that they probably got pressured heavily by the Dade Phelan lieutenants to sign this commitment. And so if you go to Texas conservative commitment, you can see what they say, and you'd read it and think, okay, well, why is this such a big deal for Dade's lieutenants to put this together? Now, I have a full video on this. Like I said, you can go to my Twitter. Probably the easiest thing to do is just go to YouTube. And I said, what is the Texas conservative commitment? So I posted it just so there was something out there before my show. I'm not going to rehash that entire thing. It's 10 minutes. Go look at it. But what you have to understand is that there were a couple goals clearly, as you can see the commitment, you can kind of clearly understand some of the goals that they were trying to achieve. One was that a bunch of Dade's lieutenants wanted something to put out that showed that they were quote unquote conservative, while also not in any way addressing the elephant in the room, which is, where's the Texas House going? Who's going to lead it? What is it even going to do? And is it going to keep fighting with all of the different conservative statewide elected officials and entities and institutions? Now, they also want to frame let's say they want to determine the scoreboard. They want to set the framing such that they get to decide whether they score points or not. See, the Texas GOP priorities are set up in such a way where when the Texas Senate passes a bill and it was a legislative priority from the Republican Party of Texas, the Republican Party of Texas says, great job, Texas Senate. You passed a Texas GOP priority. Thank you for that work. And what the Texas House leadership has always done is they've tried to create their own goals separate from the Texas GOP and then come out and say, we scored. And like they decided what the goal was, not outside conservative ideas, principles, and institutions. So this is the members telling you what they're going to score and how they're going to grade themselves. They want to perform, and then they want to grade themselves. And two good examples are election integrity and border security. So I just read through half of the election integrity priority. And also in there is standardizing in-person voting with early voting limited to a period no longer than 9 days, no gap between election day, and also opens potential fraud, counting ballots in precincts using dumb scanners, closing the party primaries to only registered Republicans. So we don't want Democrats to vote in the Republican primary, right? Explicitly codifying the ability for the Attorney General to prosecute violations of election code. That's a massive issue. We just kicked 2 Court of Criminal Appeals people out, and removing existing Secretary of State waivers to comply with current election code, which is a great thing because some of these blue counties are allowed to break the law because the Secretary of State lets them break the law. So this is what the Texas GOP has said. You need to do this to secure the elections. Now, all of Dade Phelan's lieutenants said, we're going to change the future of Texas, and here's what we're going to do. This is their election integrity commitment to Texas. Enact the strongest election integrity laws in the country, ensuring only U.S. citizens can vote, and make sure those who commit election fraud are fully prosecuted. Okay. So they don't tell you whether they're going to actually support the AG prosecuting anything. They say whatever they do, it's going to be the strongest election integrity laws in the nation. And I can promise you, no matter what they pass, they're going to say they have the strongest election integrity laws in the nation. There's no specificity to this situation. And border security is another great example. Literally, the Texas GOP says we want the Department of Homeland Security to prevent illegal entry and trafficking and deport illegals to Mexico. That's what they want, the Texas Department of Homeland Security. And then they want to prohibit mandatory fines and jail time individual corporations, nonprofits, governments, and social media entities from assisting and inciting illegal entry. So they're saying go after everybody who's facilitating the invasion, require E-Verify by employers in Texas, and end all taxpayer subsidies to illegals. That's a pretty darn clear goal. So Dade Phelan's people come in and go, we're going to make a commitment to change the future of Texas. And here's what we're going to do with the border. We're going to enact the strongest laws possible to defend our southern border, ensure illegals are denied entry and are not incentivized to be in our state, protect state sovereignty, and stop the flow of fentanyl into our communities. Now, it's just really vague, right? Like that other list I just read to you was pretty darn clear. You'd know whether we did or didn't do those things. Well, when they write it this way, they're like, do we all agree that we want to pass the strongest laws possible? Yes. Who's going to decide if we pass the strongest laws possible? Well, the politicians just wrote their own commitment, so they get to decide if they followed their commitment, which is why they write it vaguely so they can say they did it. This is just an example of how they rolled this commitment out. The other thing you can see is that they basically wrote their own commitment. They then, Texas Public Policy came out and said they thought the Texas Conservative Commitment was a good document. Okay, I'm not going to read their statement or anything, but they just put a statement out like within a minute or 2 or 3 of the Conservative Commitment getting launched, saying the Conservative Commitment is a positive policy agenda. Okay, now I will say this, like TPPF did not say this is the exclusive agenda. They didn't say this is what we should grade legislators on. That's not how I would read anything. It just said we're encouraged to see that there are conservative policies getting discussed. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that basically you could see how the politicians were trying to make this like TPPF's conservative commitment. Because remember, it kind of looks bad when you create your own scoreboard. You're like, I'm grading myself on my own work, and I'm telling you what the test is, and then I'll tell you if I pass it or not. So they almost want this to be TPPF's document. And so Jared Patterson, they didn't actually roll their own document out. They waited for TPPF, and then they all just like retweet TPPF. And Jared Patterson's like, it takes a boldly conservative agenda to follow the 2 most conservative sessions in the history of the great state. This is Jared Patterson. I am proud to support these top legislative goals crafted in part by grassroots Texans and the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Now, here's the thing. This was not crafted by grassroots Texans. This is literally crafted by all these politicians. They're like, this is what we're going to grade ourselves off of, right? Cody Harris, I look forward to working with TPPF and my colleagues in the House to develop strong conservative policy for next session. I'm proud to sign my name to the Texas Conservative Commitment. Cole Hefner, I'm proud to support the Texas Conservative Commitment. I look forward to working with TPPF on passing these bold conservative agenda, expanding on the conservative accomplishments of the last 2 sessions. And everybody had their statement, right? Everybody put it out. Dustin Burrows said, today in all caps, Texas Conservative Commitment was unveiled, and I am deeply proud to have my name on the list of signatures as we declare to all Texans our priorities for the upcoming session in 2025. Do you see what he just did there? The Texas GOP just passed their priorities last week. They asked everybody to work together on this. This is when we come together. Nope. Dustin Burrows is like, these are our priorities, right? Now, by the way, that's not even the language of the Texas conservative commitment. So all these state reps that signed on to it are like, hey, Dustin, we didn't say these are our Texas legislative priorities. Why are you saying that? He's saying that because he's trying to reframe away from the Texas GOP, right? On the heels of the two most conservative sessions in the history of our great state, we are working to keep Texas on the path of protecting family, faith, family freedom. The voice of grassroots Texans and the Texas Public Policy Foundation are reflected in these priorities, and I look forward to fighting for them during the 89th session. Again, it's a total gaslight. Like, these are the grassroots voices that are reflected in this. Really? You all rolled out your own document that you wrote. And then you're like, this is them. I swear. It's pretty funny to watch.
Are you worried about your kid's future? You should be. I'm Charles Blaine with Texas Tomorrow. This is a show where we're going to talk about the issues and the people that are pushing the policies that concern your family, your home, and your kids. Catch Texas Tomorrow every Thursday.
So I'm going to show you, though, positive examples. I don't want to just rag on these guys. I want to show you what it looks like when somebody does the opposite, okay? And I'm going to use Representative Ben Bumgarner as an example, and then Representative Cody Vasut, who both were assigned to chair subcommittees in the Republican caucus, okay? So they both were assigned to chair subcommittees in the Republican caucus. And Ben Bumgarner put out a statement. He was assigned the Texas House Republican Caucus Legislative Priorities Subcommittee. Now, here's the thing. What this is, it looks like a subcommittee in the caucus that is going to set out additional legislative priorities for the 2025 session. And when he was appointed, he could have tried to frame it like Dustin Burrows, where he's basically trying to undermine the Texas GOP and reframe and water down what the goal to accomplish things is. Instead, here's what he said. I am honored to be chosen by the Texas House Republican Caucus to lead our subcommittee on legislative priorities. Thousands of delegates at the 2024 Texas GOP convention gave us a strong list of priorities to start from, and I look forward to working with committee members and the entire caucus to add to this list. We will create a legislative agenda the people of Texas can be proud of. Do you understand how that's the complete opposite of how some of these other Dade Phelan lackeys are trying to completely reframe and undermine our goals for the session? They need to lower the standard, right? Where Ben Bumgarner comes in and says, I'm chairing this subcommittee. I want to pass the legislative priorities, and I want to add even more policy to that. Where Carl Tepper in Lubbock was like, I can't believe the rhinos at the Texas GOP didn't put property tax relief in the platform or in the legislative priorities. We have it in the platform. We don't have it in the legislative priorities. So Bumgarner did that. Cody Vasut, he actually was assigned a committee that's going to talk about the rules, right? And when he was assigned that, his statement, which I also thought was pretty well put together, he said, today, I was appointed to serve as the chair of the Texas GOP Caucus Subcommittee on Parliamentary Process. Now, again, the Texas Conservative Commitment didn't talk about Democrat chairs, didn't talk about any rules changes, anything like that, because these guys are trying to say, hey, can we all agree if we pass a couple more conservative bills, we can all stay in charge and empower? And so they don't want to talk about the process at all. Well, Cody Vasut said, I was appointed to subcommittee chair on parliamentary process. The committee includes Representatives Bell, Kane, Gates, Hayes, Patterson, Schofield, Smithy, and Tinderholt. The committee is tasked with recommending changes to the House rules and parliamentary practices for consideration by the 89th caucus. So basically, we're going to start putting together some rules changes to consider for the 89th caucus. I look forward to working with all my fellow Republican members and nominees to identify and recommend reforms to the House rules and parliamentary practices that will empower members, cut back on ticky-tacky points of order, and help ensure good public policy, like our Republican legislative priorities, is advanced. Again, that's the right way you should be talking. Now, look, I've criticized Cody Vasut on this show before and stuff he's done under previous House regimes. So I'm not saying that everything Cody Vasut now says is correct, but this is the kind of framing that we should be. See, encouraging, because if you look at what Cody Vasut and Ben Bumgarner said, the Texas GOP and SREC members and county chairmen and grassroots activists and all these various players, conservative policy entities, organizations, institutions, they look at this and they go, this sounds like a Republican caucus that wants to work together. And that's what we should be pushing towards. We should be pushing towards lowering the tension in the room, right? Let's not poke each other in the eye. Let's not try to undermine each other. Let's agree on some of these basic principles and then try to advance as much as possible. Okay. And yes, there will be some small fights that break out and policies that we don't all see eye to eye on, and we'll have to wrestle that out. But right now we're fighting on big things all the time. And based on Dustin Burrows' tweet, he wants to keep fighting at that level. He's like, I will not let the Texas GOP priorities be priorities in this chamber. So if you're at the convention, if you're a longtime Republican activist, if you're somebody who puts a lot of time into trying to make sure we get as many Republican policies across the finish line as possible, Dustin Burrows is like, I'll tell you what our priorities are. I'm going to write them. I'm going to put them up on some website that nobody knows who owns the website. And then I'm going to tell you there are priorities after I wrote them, and that they're the grassroots priorities and they're TPPF's priorities, and now there are priorities, right? So he's even going to act like these aren't his priorities that he wrote. Cody Vasut, Ben Bumgarner took different approaches, and we should be grateful because they show a different approach than what the main architects of the Texas conservative commitment wanted to do, how they wanted to go about it. So hopefully the Republican caucus and members in the caucus can see the difference and can say, hey, maybe we should move a different direction, because Burrows and Bonin and Buckley and Cody Harris and these guys are going to be working overtime to try to make sure that when Dade is no longer speaker, they're all still in charge. That's what this is about, right? And so Republican members need to see the two different approaches that they could take and understand that one puts them on a path to constant, continued conflict, poking the eyes of the Senate and statewide elected officials in the Texas GOP and the grassroots. And the other says, we actually want to work together. It doesn't mean we're going to agree and kumbaya and it's perfect and we pass everything all the time. That's not what we're headed towards. But we might be headed towards less conflict unless Dustin Burrows has his way, right? And at some point, maybe Dustin Burrows and these other members can wake up and go, yeah, we're probably going to have to take a less combative approach because of the changes that are happening in the state of Texas. And maybe, just maybe, we should start working with these people instead of constantly trying to flex and undermine the conservative policy that everybody else is on the same page to pass. So that's kind of what's happening in the state of Texas. Those are a couple of the bigger things that you should be aware of and understand. And ultimately, you should still be encouraged because the Texas GOP and so many of the other elected officials and so many grassroots people and donors and activists, and I just meet with various different people all the time in different cities all across Texas right now. And they're all stamping up and saying, this is an exciting time. Organizational leaders and public policy individuals saying, we want to work on these policies. So yes, there is this last vestige of leadership in the Texas House that are going to try to work these games to divide people. But I really do think that they are smaller than they've ever been. And hopefully members see the distinction and the difference and choose a different path. That's the hope. If they don't, we're going to keep fighting. I think you all know that. We're all going to stay in this fight and keep fighting to pass as much conservative policy as possible, make them pass as much conservative policy as possible, and then continue to fight against anybody who's holding these conservative policies up. That's just what's going to happen. But I don't think it has to happen if some of these people would just start working together. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.